Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and we're back with another better investment video for version 2.0. The new characters that are coming out, Black Swan and Sparkle. This is one of our signature series, and we're going to be talking a lot about how these characters work in the current meta in the future as well. We don't waste time on this channel, so let's go ahead and just jump in right away with the current value of these two amazing units in version 2.0. It's really unfortunate that they have to release both of these units in the same patch, because I think they are very, very fantastic units that scale really nicely into Penacony and as well as the later game in Honkai Star Rail. So current value. Let's talk a bit about what they do first, in case any of you who have no idea, like you didn't watch the live stream at all. I'll give us a bit of commentary on the main TLDR of the characters kits. Sparkle is a skill point buffer that works nicely in a lot of teams, especially if your DPS consumes skill points or even mono quantum teams. These are where she really excels. She's the only skill point dedicated buffer that can increase the number of skill points we can carry. So I think it's like 5. She increases it maybe to 7 or something like that. Not exactly 100% sure. But we have also Black Swan on the other half, who is an excellent not only DPS DOT kind of character, but it's also a pretty nice supportive DOT character. So if eventually, similar to Kafka, if she's no longer like the main DPS, you could always find her in a more supportive role too. She does have some flaws, which I will talk about in this video too in terms of investment value. So now we have give like a touch on both of them. What is the current value of both of them? For Black Swan, I think will rank slightly lower than Sparkle here, for the fact that now if you're talking about currently in the game state, DOT teams like Kafka teams are not like super high up in the meta, whereas like characters, hyper carry kind of teams where you have, for example, like Imbibitor Lune, you have characters like Zila, Jingyuan, or characters that you just want to use skill points. These units are the current flavor of Honkai Star Rail, and we can't deny that. So definitely I think that Harmony characters right now outperform other classes by quite a large margin. Do I think it will change? Yes, I do think so, but that's of course for the future value section. This is talking mainly about current value of where do these two characters stand. If you do not have a character like Kafka on your account, I think Black Swan's value would drop a little bit, and the reason for that is a lot of her DOT damage instances requires the enemy to move. You only have a limited number of turns in the Memory of Chaos. You only have like 5 rounds on each half, and on the Pure Fiction you have even less. You have like 4 rounds. So if you do not have something that pops the DOT, for example like Kafka's ability to explode it, I think that you might find a little bit of trickiness. No matter how much damage you do, if you aren't able to like pop the damage, I think it's a bit trickier to run. So that's why I think Kafka is a pretty critical factor for Black Swan. But of course we will have to see exactly. But that's my initial impression so far, based on the official information that we know. So that's for current value, and it's a very, very quick summary, because I think the bulk of these two will be talking about the alternatives as well as the future value that these characters will provide, because Penacony is going to do a massive shift, and I want to account for that in this video as well. So alternatives. There are really no alternatives currently to Black Swan. So if we were to talk about like who is in the DOT section, I think it's like I'll classify Kafka here. I'll classify maybe to some extent Gui Naifen, Sampo, and some might consider Luca here maybe, and probably the other characters that people will play are like Esther as well as Ranmei. These are really like the only other characters who really purely fit into DOT kind of teams. And if any of you wondering like how to build these characters, like they'll be super good as well. And none of them, if you look over here, are actually true alternatives to Black Swan, because none of them are like as DPS heavy as her. She's a very, very strong DOT DPS in her own right. The only other 5-star DOT character we have is like Kafka, who's not really a DPS DOT, if you guys get what I mean. She like kind of like procs the DOT. She's more of like a supportive DOT character, which is why I think Black Swan definitely does outperform in this category. Very, very unique situation to be in. We're having nearly no alternatives currently in the game, and yet a lot of synergies you have. Out of all of these characters, like 4 of them out of 6 are 4 stars. So I think that does speak volume in terms of how versatile this character can be in terms of a cheaper cast too. So that is for alternative section. Not really not many right now. But future value and whether other things are going to come up, we'll talk about that in a bit. Let's move on to Sparkle first. So while a character like Black Swan has no alternatives at all, I would argue that every single part of Sparkle's kit has alternatives. Her action advance is obviously you have a character like Bronya, so if you really like action advance, Bronya has that. I'm not saying one is better than the other because they can easily play on the same team to be a super massive hyper carry. She provides the skill points push and crit damage. She also provides crit damage, but we'll talk about that in like another video. I'm just here to talk about like alternatives, whether these characters, if you really have like super little resources, you want to maximize the value of each and every single dollar that you spend. That's really what this video is aiming to do. So action advance, you have Bronya. And if you are looking for skill points positive units, to some extent, you have characters like Runmei, you have characters like Hanya, you have characters like Tingyun. They do provide like a little bit of skill points here and there, but none of them really truly expand the number of skill points that you have and are available to carry. And for example, if in future you have more units coming out that really drinks skill points, Sparkle is a gateway character that allows you to play into those teams, which is strange because this is a 5-star, basically like a is it what you call a paywall gate, a paywall gate or something like that? I'm not even sure, but then if they want to release more 5-star characters in future that drink skill points, this character is important. And the question is, will we see a 4-star? We will discuss that later on, of course. A 4-star character like her in this kit. That is basically for her, and in the Quantum Harmony section, that is where she truly shines, because there's really no alternatives for a Quantum Harmony unit. A lot of people are playing Tingyun together with like Zealer, Bronya together with Zealer and stuff like that, because there's no Quantum unit until now. Sparkle is that response, and I think Sparkle would definitely see great value for other teams with like Zealer and other Quantum DPSs. For example, like Tingxue, who's also a Quantum DPS that drinks skill points. So I see a lot of good upsides for these kind of teams. We will touch on that in a little bit too. But yeah, that's my alternatives. In my opinion, I think Black Swan kind of wins in the current state of the game in terms of alternatives there are in the game. There are just not too many DOT characters out there. But of course, current state is not the only thing that we want to think about. We whenever we talk about investment value in characters, we always want to know how far can our character go before they become obsolete. You don't want to like just buy a stock and then next day it just bleeds out into zero, right? You want to know that you get value today, but you also get value tomorrow. And that is what this section here is going to talk about, which is future value, if I can drag it across. So in this future value section, we are going to be talking about these characters, and we're going to predict what's going to happen in a couple of moments. Of course, future value is a more higher chance. We'll have a more like iffy one where it's a low probability but still a chance of error. We'll call that like the potential section. But let's first talk about future value, power creeping and all that. In my opinion, like between both of them, the character that probably would see more characters entering the space is Black Swan. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't think it's like Black Swan is going to get power crap in that sense. If you look at her overall kit, she stacks Arcana, she's able to debuff the enemies, do more damage as well. I think that she's like a mix of Pella as well as Kuei Knife in her kit, which has very supportive elements as well. So even if like a new stronger DPS comes about, as long as they do like DOT, she will benefit from it straight up. And her DOT is also not purely considered as wind shear, so even if you have like a wind same typing element, it might not be bad for her either, because her debuff is like Arcana, right, which is like totally different as well, which procs in a very different manner. So it's not as if it's like wind shear kind of thing that is you compete and you suffocate each other. For example, like a Sampo and Black Swan's team is still very viable. So that's one thing that I want to talk about like moving forward. I see her as having more people entering her space, more alternatives, but not a competing alternatives, if you guys get what I mean. Whereas for Sparkle here, Sparkle's value is very interesting because technically the reason why the game isn't creating more characters like Imbibitor Lune is because we do not simply have enough characters that drink skill points or give skill points to the rest of the team. If you think that just rewind one patch ago, we didn't have Hanya, we didn't have Runmei. The only skill point positive unit that we had was Tingyun in terms of the hyper carry harmony character, which most people are running. Imbibitor Lune plus this was really tough to run for the most part, and it just means that you can't run a double DPS with skill point hungry characters. Your unit here, Sparkle, is a gateway to allowing you to run double DPS teams with characters like Imbibitor Lune and Zealer. So a team like this, where Imbibitor Lune and Zealer were on the same team, Before Sparkle, impossible. People will laugh at you if you ever talked about these kind of team compositions. Where are you going to get the skill points from? But now with Sparkle, there is a possibility of putting these two together in the same team because of just the massive amounts of skill points that she provides. Especially if you think about a comp like this, double DPS together with a Harmony, your last slot you can slap in a Sustain, which generally is skill point positive as well. You get tons of value out of that as well. And I think it's likely going to be a very critical factor moving forward. Because she enables double DPS teams, even your unorthodox teams initially with like characters that use a lot of skill points like Imbibitor Lune, like Zealer as well. I think she helps expand hyper carry teams into double DPS teams, which is very, very important. So that is like the future value of what I think these two characters do. In my opinion, if I were to put a weight, Sparkle unlocks a new playstyle, whereas Black Swan reinforces a current playstyle. So between both of them, my logical brain would tell me that opening new playstyles and allowing us to play more playstyles does kind of make more sense. So I'll rank in terms of future value Sparkle a little bit higher for investment value. But of course, there's one caveat. What if DOT teams become irreplaceable in future? What if they are the new meta and hyper carry team is like no longer the current meta? And that is why I want to shift to this section here, which is potential, because there's a lot of ifs and what ifs. This is where we actually speculate rather than talking about things with a bit more certainty as we did in the future section. So under the circumstance that DOT teams, which I think might be pushed more into the meta because we can see how they're trying to go, right? They want to go more into break effect. They are releasing new sets for it. You have Runmei that's entering the game. They are releasing DOT characters being added into the game. You have units that do fatal damage to your team. They also have units that switch their buffs and debuffs based on the number of times that you hit them. DOT teams spread damage across the board. So let's just put a typical team here. You have, let's say, the ideal team, right? You have Black Swan, you have Kafka, maybe you have a character like Runmei here, and Ho in the last slot. What you notice here is you have damage coming from two spaces, and you have a very good balance of both sustain, a lot of damage buffing from Runmei, and double DPS in nature. This team composition, if DOT is the way to play and is the meta, then I would say that Black Swan becomes a critical enabler because she does massive amounts of damage. She allows DOT teams to actually put out some massive numbers, and I think that losing a Black Swan and having to run, for example, a Kafka and maybe a Sampo in replacement, and if this team was like forced to become meta, might not be as good as a Black Swan team in replacement of a character like Sampo. So she doesn't have much alternatives as we talk about. The 4-star equivalents are still okay, but you don't really replace her completely. She will add a lot of value to DOT teams. The question is, does DOT become meta? And based on what I'm seeing, I think the odds are more favorable than against. In this category like potential, I lean more towards her because Sparkle's potential, in order for her to really like pop off and become truly indispensable, is they start releasing every unit like this. They release Imbibitor Lune, they release and he's like the only character that drinks like tons of skill points other than maybe like Tingche, right? The rest of them currently in the game drink some sort of skill points, but not like massive amounts. Maybe Zealer to like a lesser extent, but you can control how much skill points you use depending on the stage also. So other than these three, I don't think we have a massive amounts of skill point guzzlers. And for Hoyoverse to release units in future with similar traits to like Imbibitor Lune, Tingche and stuff, it will really box out players who don't have Sparkle. So you either release these new units and box out and like alienate all your free-to-play players who didn't pull Sparkle, or eventually you are forced to introduce a 4-star character like Hanya, for example, who feeds skill points similar to how she does. Maybe like instead of 2 maximum skill points gauge, you have like 1 gauge maximum now. So I do think that either of these situations, the likelihood is Sparkle's value will diminish. If they do want to force introducing new characters, they have to give us more skill point buffing type units. If not, you will alienate the player base. So in that sense, I think that Black Swan, it would be the safer pick for investment value in a longer term horizon, considering the fact that you have upside from DOT teams, you have upside from what if new other DOT characters come into the game. She can also be played like Kafka as a support, so you have like triple DOT and maybe Ho in the last slot here, so you have like maybe one more DOT together with like Ho. The rotations, the team combinations still are viable. Whereas for Sparkle, the risk seems skewed more to the downside than the upside to me moving forward and thinking of the potential value. But of course, talking about potential value, talking about current value is all very useful. But at the end of the day, the last thing that we always need to consider is the free-to-play viability of these two characters. There is no point buying a character that you are forced to buy the signature light cone, or you are required to buy maybe a battle pass so that you can make them outperform. That is like ridiculous, right? Because then you're comparing $100 versus like $500, which is completely different. In my opinion, I think in terms of a free-to-play kit, a character like Sparkle would tend to outperform a little bit more. The Harmony light cones for free-to-play players are a little bit more than others, whereas I think that Black Swan's light cone choices are a little bit more restrictive because she is a damage dealer after all, and the free-to-play Nihiti light cone isn't exactly like super perfect for her. We'll talk about her build guide video in a little bit. You can check it out on channel if you're interested. But one of the light cones that might be very viable from her is the Energy Recharge light cone from one of the events in Silver Wolf, I think like way back in like 1.1 or 1.2, which is no longer free to play because it's an event exclusive light cone and it's still usable by her, which I think that creates a bit of a barrier. Of course, being a DPS in nature, which means that you want more higher stats, you want 5-star stats, you want a bit more scaling as well, and the alternatives are not too fantastic, whereas Harmony characters in general are pretty cheap to run. You don't have too much downside. And in my opinion, I think like Sparkle beats in this category compared to Black Swan. At least that's in my personal preference. And last but not least, I just want to share with you my personal bias right now. We've come to really towards the end, and throughout the video I've been trying to be as impartial as I can, not inputting my opinions. But now I'll share with you my thoughts. My strongest opinion, my game sense, like after playing years and years of these kind of games, turn-based games as well, I think that the meta is going to shift. The current meta, the current game state of like hyper carry Imbibitor Lune is slowly going to diminish. It makes more sense because they want to sell you more team compositions, more characters. So we will start to see more niche comms and requirements for having multiple DPS characters on one team, which means your hyper carry teams are slowly going to fade away. And if you are thinking of like Imbibitor Lune's kind of Sparkle, I don't know how much utility these teams will have in future. If she's a gateway for sure, but a gateway that has limited upside and has a possibility of being replaced. For example, you can just slot in alternatives like Hanya and Ronmei. You might not get the full Sparkle effect, but still you can get by with a little bit of alternatives for the skill point buffing in other sense too. Whereas Black Swan is really a hitch to DOT teams and the meta that is upcoming in the near future. So super long term, like if you are stretching it out to 2 years, 3 years you're playing the game, I think Sparkle will be the better investment value. But in the near term, if you want to ride through Panacony, you like her design, maybe you are looking to at least adjust to the changing meta, I think Black Swan will be the better pick. I personally would choose Black Swan because I am a short-term person and I like waifus, so it's a pretty simple choice for me. But anyways guys, let me know your comments below too, your thoughts. Who do you think is better? Do you have a bias as well? Anyways, see you in the next video.